Oh, hello there. I'm Andy with the S'more Stories podcast, and we have a great show for you today, but I just wanted to chime in here before the show officially starts and let you know that from time to time, we'll be talking about some gruesome and gross history, so viewer discretion is advised. If you want to play it by ear, look up the title of the episode on Google. If it immediately seems like some history you can't bear hearing, then don't listen. We aren't offended. We want to value your boundaries and comfort level. If you continue on, just know some of our content recalls some disturbing history. I mean, we talk about ghosts and death after all. As far as cursing, we try not to curse, but you will also try to hear that bleeped out as best we can. Feel free to reach out on our social media if you ever have any questions. But other than that, let's get on with the ghost.
Welcome to the S'more Stories podcast. I am Mantis, and today we will be talking about the hauntings at Gettysburg. I am joined by my co-host Andy and Shay, and today, again, we will be talking about the hauntings of Gettysburg.
It is various, so just make sure you guys are aware that we are talking about more than just the battle, but most everything that centralizes around the battle. So there will be a lot of history, and we hope we can keep you guys on the same path that we are talking about.
So Gettysburg history starts around 1760 when a tavern owner named Samuel Geddes founded a tavern in what is now modern-day Adams County, Pennsylvania. Many traders and many soldiers at the time visited this, and it was very popular to stay there. Eventually, his son James inherited 116 acres and divided it into 220 lots of land and sold them off. James was considered the founder of Gettysburg as he laid out the boundaries of this eventual town. And this town would not be very popular until July 1st, 1863, when the Confederate Army would try to invade the North for the second time and would march into Gettysburg, leading to the bloodiest battle on U.S. soil for 3 days.
So the Battle of Gettysburg literally happened 3 years after the town's founding?
No, that was in 1760.
Oh, never mind. I'm a complete buddy. So it's 100 years. But it's still a small town. Like, it seems like it's still a small town to this day, right?
Yeah.
Like, I saw that there's 8,000 people.
Yeah, the population is very small.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that the town was actually incorporated in 1806.
So like, okay.
It was about 50 years after. But
that's still pretty relatively soon, all things considered, for a town.
Right.
Like, it's still
even 100 years feels pretty soon.
It's a startup project. But okay, yes, sorry. Sorry to intrude.
No, yeah. The Battle of Gettysburg, again, was the bloodiest battle on American soil, with about 51,000 deaths, 28,063 from the Confederate Army, and 23,049 from the Union Army. This total also included one civilian death, Mary Virginia Wade, also called Jenny Wade, as she was shot on the final day at 8:30 in the morning while kneading dough. She was just 20 years old, but was likely killed by a stray bullet.
I will say, for the battle literally being inside the town itself, one civilian casualty is not that bad. I mean, I feel bad because that was just bad luck.
I mean, do you have anything about what the population was at the time?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I do not.
I mean, it doesn't sound like there was a lot, because you said he had separated into 200 plots?
Yeah, 220.
220. So yeah, approximately 200 some people live there. Give or take.
I would say a bit more than that.
I can probably find it, but just keep talking and I'll Google search it.
Just because it would give us a better ratio of what it was, civilian death to...
It still sounds like no matter what, small town.
Yeah.
Alright, so we all did a lot of research on the Battle of Gettysburg, so pardon us if this is like a stitch effort, because we all tried it. There's a lot of names involved. So I like to just start this off with saying that, first off, as you mentioned, it started on July 1st of 1863. So it is a 3-day battle. I'm not sure how long battles normally are. Would you know anything about that, Mantis?
They can be, I feel like that's pretty typical. I'm not a historian, but I feel that, usually around 2 days to even a week would be your typical.
Okay. It's just, like 3 days feels pretty small. And then for it to also end up being just
the bloodiest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting the story July 1st. It's almost Independence Day, all those good things. And I wanted to specifically kind of start off because I had a hard time figuring out why did they want to attack Gettysburg. And the only thing I could find is that Henry Heth, who is a Confederate Major General, which makes me want to sing that song. I am a Major General. But anyway, he decided that he wanted to invade Gettysburg, which was in the north at the time, because he wanted the supplies of the town. Now, I don't know what those supplies were. I don't know if it was agriculture. It sounds like it's an agriculture kind of town. So maybe it was.
Yes.
So maybe it was food they wanted. I don't know.
Maybe bulk up on their supplies.
I was thinking potentially because it isn't far from Pittsburgh. They could be also looking for steel. It's in the central. It's in
PA,
central Pennsylvania. Fairly, it's on the border of Maryland too. So Maryland was also a southern state, considered a southern state at this time, and for that to really be a good point for them to start breaking into the north, they were close to Washington D.C. They were close to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, even kind of relatively close to New York.
Okay, yeah, so it's very centralized. So I get attacking it. It's just it was only described as being attacked. So Henry Heth decided that the Confederacy would attack Gettysburg because they wanted whatever supplies were in the town. It's not necessarily an advantage point. They just want supplies. And then, so apparently, as they probably always did, the Union heard that the Confederacy was coming to attack Gettysburg, so they show up a day early, and then they have the cavalry come, at least at first. So the chief of cavalry, who was John Buford at this time, he sets up his troops. They go west of town because they were expecting the Confeds to come from the west, and they were correct, but they set up on a ton of hills, so they had the upper advantage. And the cavalry didn't have too many people, and also I must say, first off, two things. I didn't know, one, what cavalry meant. Apparently for anybody else who is an idiot like me out there, cavalry means specifically soldiers on horseback, but also it's weird because it sounds like in this specific instance, they're all cavalrymen, but they were all dismounted, so it doesn't matter. I know, they weren't on horse, but either way, they send the cavalry out. The cavalry holds them up, basically. It just kind of stalls in the morning of the first morning of July 1st, and then they wait for the Union Corps to show up, so the actual infantry starts to show up. And then I will let Mantis take over because I know he has a little bit more on the infantry that shows up after John Buford.
Union Commander John F. Reynolds was killed almost instantly by either friendly fire or by a Confederate sharpshooter.
I know, isn't it? Sorry, it's so funny that the cavalry is supposed to be the underdogs and they held them off, and then here they come, knights in shining armor, and then the head just gets killed.
Yeah.
It's sad, alright.
First day of the battle, literally the first fire shot, it sounds
And from my understanding, his corps, as in the Union Corps, is one of the best of the best at the time. I think it's Union Corps 1 or something.
Yeah.
They were strong. So it's so sad. But you can continue, I'm so sorry.
Reynolds was also the highest ranked old at Gettysburg during all 3 days.
So, for context, because I am aware, but I wanted to make sure we're on the same page, he was replaced by somebody quite quickly. So do you have the name of the person he was replaced by?
I do not.
Okay. I have it somewhere, but I can help when we get there because it's not applicable until day 3 of the battle.
Well, and there's so many names.
There is, and they're all John and Robert.
And George.
But
And a lot of handlebars.
oh my God, there's some good
And mutton
mustaches.
chop.
So I
Let's
think
bring that style back.
I think I found it. So he's really only applicable on the 3rd day of the battle, but I just wanted to let everybody know for future context. John F. Reynolds was replaced by Winfield S. Hancock, who took over for him, and not only that, but he apparently ran president not too much longer, 20 years later. So
Is he related to,
no, they spell it different if you're gonna ask about John Hancock.
Yeah.
All right. So after the fact that Reynolds was shot, a lot of his death is still controversial and things like that. A lot of people speculate. They don't know for sure how he died. died other than it was a bullet. After he dies, the Union was kind of doing okay holding defenses, like, at the battle. They were holding the line pretty well until we have the Confederate generals A.P. Hill and Richard Ewell who show up. Now, Richard Ewell is a big player in this, and why I specifically also wanted to mention it is because he had a falling, like, legacy. His reputation was suffering already. So when he came in, there were not high hopes, and then he does something that kind of, like, sadly damages his reputation further. I hate to feel bad for a Confederate general, but if I did, it would be Robert Ewell. So they're pushing onto the Union's defense lines, these two Confederate generals and their infantries. And then suddenly the Union line breaks. The Union has to run up to Cemetery Hill. They are basically fall in line. They broke. This is starting to look like a Confederacy win, and for some reason, some unknown reason, even though Robert E. Lee, basically the commander of the entire Southern Confederacy Army, he told Robert Ewell to continue attacking in these type of situations. For some unknown reason, Robert Ewell ceasefires. And the only reason I even bring that up is because a lot of historians say to this day, they don't know what would have happened if they kept pushing that day, because the Union, that was the only time the Union's line truly broke, and it could have been really bad, like immediately. So I always thought that was interesting, because it was literally like the main time I think the Confederacy had a chance to win, and I don't know why the general decided to stop it. And
They
then there was
flubbed it.
Oh, I'm sorry, continue.
I said they flubbed it.
They literally did. And then the other general, who I don't know much about, but A.P. Hill, he's so dirty. Like, this guy, he's a true man of his time, I'll just say that. So Robert Ewell, I feel bad for him. He's also on crutches, by the way, at this point, apparently. Apparently he was walking around the battlefield on crutches, so, and by the way, his nickname in battle was Old Bald Head, so I thought that was funny. But then there's this A.P. Hill guy who's just kind of crazy. First off, his real name is Ambrose, which is ugly. Second off, he's the only man in all their little headshot photos who look dirty. And third, he basically was surrounded, and this is, years later, I just found this funny to his character. Years later, he was surrounded by Union soldiers, and he told them to surrender, and one Union soldier just shot him in the chest, and that's how he died. And the only thing I like is he said he would never die, or he would never want to live where the Confederacy doesn't exist, and he died 7 days before Robert E. Lee surrendered. So, A.P. Hill, Confederate through and through.
So we hate him.
And
We don't like him, but...
that's a very interesting point, because this is also in the middle of the Civil War. The Confederacy has been the dominating power so far. They have been winning most of the battles, and most of it has been fighting in their land. Obviously, we've mentioned that this is only the second time that the South has tried to invade the North, but it's still a huge win for the South at this time. And who knows, because this battle would go on to be the huge turning point in the Civil War. So who knows if they had won, if it would have turned out a lot differently.
I saw somewhere where it kind of defined that the Union was going to win.
Yeah.
Like, this was pretty much the end of the Confederate after the Battle of Gettysburg.
No, exactly. So why would General Robert Ewell, did he have like a moral thing? Why did he stop? Why did he say, we're done attacking them? That is a pinnacle, I just think, good debatable topic for anybody out there who's interested in the battle, or just a historian.
Maybe his subconscious got to him and he started to feel guilty about having slaves.
Well, we don't even know if he had slaves or anything like that. We just know he's a Confederate general. I did not look that far into him, so I don't know if he's just a war-based person. He just wants to fight.
Yeah, Robert E. Lee, the general of the South Army at this time, he actually was very anti-slavery. The only reason why he was the commander for the Confederate Army was because he wanted to side with Virginia, his home state, but Virginia obviously ended up breaking in half because of it. Virginia and West Virginia.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I didn't even know that. But yeah, that's a good point. Okay, sorry. And then you had something specific about a specific house?
Yes, Bushman House. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later, but it was a former Confederate field house, and it's still standing as far as I'm concerned today.
As far as you're concerned?
Well, yes, I don't know if it's still standing, but it seems to be. And there was a lot of emergency amputations. I'm sure you can imagine what that was like, biting onto the stick.
Bullets, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a term, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not an idiot.
No. Well, sometimes I'd use the gun to, like, ease the nerve pain.
Could you imagine? I would just die. I'd just be like, no, we can just kill me.
Well, a lot of people ended up dying from it, so...
Disease was the #1 killer in the Civil War.
Yep, disgusting. Also, John Buford, the chief of cavalry, died of typhoid. Random.
Love me some good old typhoid.
But you can imagine that there was, again, a lot of emergency surgeries here, a lot of deaths, obviously, and just a lot of dread. Mm-hmm. So, again, we'll get into that later, and I'm going to pass this over to Shay, who wanted to talk about something similar.
Oh, yeah. So, the main part of my research was looking at what is claimed to be haunted. Through that, I found a lot of these hospitals that were in other buildings. So, like, there's a lot of hotels, modern-day hotels that were used as hospitals during that time. There was orphanages, a bunch of that taking in soldiers, and there was only one. I don't have it written down, but there was only one hospital that would treat Confederate and Union soldiers. Every other hospital was one or the other.
That is interesting for sure.
And I don't think she was a part of this battle, but Clara Barton, the founder of the Red Cross, was also someone who would do that. And during battles, she would treat both Union and Confederate, and was a very highly respected person because of it.
Yeah, and I know when we're done with the battles, I will mention Tilly Pierce, who was another person who did take in a ton of soldiers and was performing amputations, and I believe she was 15 at the time, which is also insane. But I will talk more about that later. But yeah, for day 2, did you want to start on day 2 of the battle?
I actually don't have that much for day 2.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and then do day 2, which, yes, it's very filler day, but I think this is like kind of proving why the Confederacy decides to do what they do on day 3. So, July 2nd of 1863, Robert E. Lee, I said he's the commander of the entire Confederacy, as Mantis has also stated. I think it was just like he was feeling good. The victory from basically yesterday of making the Union line collapse, that was in his head. So he kind of ordered his peeps to attack the Union from the outside of their formation. So the Union was kind of formed, and I think it was just climate-wise or geography-wise, but it was formed in like a fish hook, their line. So their line around the town was like, it looked like a fish hook. And so Robert E. Lee was saying, attack the outside of that fish hook area, if that helps anybody visually. So he started to tell his people that, hey, we're going to start attacking from the outside. And in the morning, they started attacking the outside of the fish hook. There really wasn't much progress. The Union was doing a pretty good job of defending the line. And then, I like to mention this because it's funny, there is a Union general, Major General, named Daniel Sickles, who made his infantry attack without authorization. Now, I want to just note that the Union was defending, so for him to go out and attack threw off the Confederacy a little bit. And it didn't pay off super well. So he starts to attack the Confederacy, and it does seem to throw them for like a little like loop. So the Confederacy is like, whoa, it halts them a bit, but he killed 40% of his infantry.
I do think he made it actually pretty far. I can't remember, but they do have a marker. I don't know if it's for this guy specifically, but somewhere in the main field of where the battles were taking place, they actually have a place marker for someone who was making a charge where he actually died.
So he was basically just trying to ambush them, thinking he could take the whole Confederacy on his own.
I don't know.
Again, I'm not sure if it's the same guy, but this guy was he was going havoc, probably with having a good time.
I know. And this guy's a major general. I just want to also point that out. Like, this man has power, and he is doing some crazy stuff. But, I mean, good for him for technically throwing them for a loop, but he did also kill a lot of men in a pretty weird effort. And then a fun fact about Daniel Sickle is that I don't know if it's this day or the next day, but either way, at the Battle of Gettysburg, he eventually gets shot with a cannon, and one of his legs got amputated. So he still lived to be pretty long, and he became a politician.
He got shot by a cannon and survived? He only lost his leg?
I guess, so have you ever seen The Patriot?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this scene from The Patriot that always kind of like stuck with me about cannons, because the cannonball was just rolling on the ground and it took out somebody's leg. So not that that's obviously what happened, but it could be literally something very similar. Something just rolls and takes out legs, which is awful. But no, it did not hit him in the chest thing. So yeah, he lost the leg. But yeah, so after Daniel Sickles' charge losing men or whatever. Then we have General James Longstreet of the Confederacy. He's just following orders from Robert E. Lee. He's trying to close in on the Union line, trying to progress. Literally, that's what he's doing. And then luckily, the replacement for John F. Reynolds, which is Winfield S. Hancock, he is starting to push back. He's also making positions and making good strategical moves to halt the Confederacy. So he's a major player in actually helping defend the line. So he's doing a great thing for the Union line. All in all, it sounds like on the second day, the Confederates did do a lot of damage, but the line is still being held today. It is pretty evenly drawn.
I do believe that the second day was the bloodiest day.
I actually don't know for sure. I would say definitely for sure the bloodiest day for the Union, because I think the third day is where the Confederates, that's why they lose ultimately, but I would say the third day. But yes. And then do you have notes on the third day of the battle?
I do, mostly for the start. The third day, bright and early, well, maybe not at this time in the morning, but it was 8:30 a.m. A 20-year-old Jenny Wade was shot and killed while kneading dough in her sister's house. I believe it's her sister's house, but it was most likely a stray bullet, and she died pretty much instantly while Confederate soldiers began to rush into the home, and they managed to escape, I think, through their neighbor's house.
I don't know. The only reason I even know anything for sure about the house is because I did hear the Confederates rush, and I was like, why were they rushing in there? And it was to gain guard. They were just trying to hide. For sure. No, and I'm glad you mentioned Jenny Wade. She's definitely going to come back when we get to the haunted parts. But did you have any more on the battle itself?
Oh, well, obviously the battle ends on day 3, and it's not fun. And later on, now this is kind of fast forwarding to November, but November 19th, the Gettysburg Address would be made by Abraham Lincoln.
Why was it so much later than when the battle ended?
I'm not sure why, but...
As presidents. But, okay, so I can talk about day 3 if we want. So day 3 is officially when the Confederacy kind of lost, because it sounds like day 1, Confederate win. Day 2, pretty even. We're doing some damage on both sides, holding still. Day 3 is where I think the Confederacy really kind of just got screwed. Yeah. So it's July 3rd of 1863, the last day of the battle. Robert E. Lee, he was, for some reason, I don't really know. This is a bad strategic move he makes, and I'm not sure why. He was out for blood, or maybe he wanted to get it done super quickly. He was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Let's get this moving. So he ordered General James Longstreet, who was mentioned in the second day. That's one of the Confederacy generals. He orders him to attack the left of this fishhook that the Union formation was making. And he asked General Robert Ewell, the guy who screwed up on day 1, to attack the north. So he wants them attacked from both sides of their line. So he says, start attacking. Then he asks General George Pickett, who is another Confederate general, to start attacking the north, but he wants him to charge down the middle. I don't know what the tactic was here. I don't know if he just thought that the Union line wasn't strong enough to hold, but he wanted George Pickett to charge down the middle. My favorite thing is, I think, it's not the exact words, but General George Pickett, to this command that Robert E. Lee gives him, he says, but sir, basically, I don't have any men. His entire infantry was wiped out just the day prior or something. So he's without men. So Robert E. Lee is like, okay, so Longstreet, you send some guys, you go attack with Pickett. So Pickett and Longstreet's men, they start, what's left of them, they start deciding they're going to charge down the middle of the line. And this would go on to be called Pickett's Charge, which is a very famous area of the thing.
It is one of the most deadliest and very, very havoc-wreaking.
Yes. So this charge was not thought through, and there were immediately identified problems. This is why I'm saying I don't understand why Robert E. Lee called this. He sounds like he's very experienced with war and stuff like that, so this is a weird call. That's why I'm saying maybe he wanted it done quickly. But as soon as he ordered the charge, it didn't work. It said that one group of Confederate soldiers got to where they wanted to go, but they were quickly wiped out. Literally, day 3 of this battle accounted for 60% of all Confederacy deaths. 60% of them occurred on day 3 because of this charge. And because this charge went so poorly, just wreaked havoc, destroyed and killed so many Confederate soldiers, Robert E. Lee surrendered and they left.
coward. Well, I mean, he just killed a lot of people.
I know, it's a joke.
So the Union line held strong, which is great for them. They got the things they wanted to do done. They actually defended really well, but the Pickett's charge is officially what killed the Confederacy on the Gettysburg battle. But yes, that was all I had on the battle itself.
So shortly after this, the Union had won the Battle of Gettysburg, and this motivated many of the soldiers, many of the generals, and so this really turned the tides of the war as the Union would start winning a bit more and would start to really do numbers against the Confederacy. It would actually start to really make General Robert E. Lee a bit anxious about the whole war, and eventually leading to a surrender about a year and a half later on April of 1865. So now we'll jump into the hauntings.
Yay!
One of the big haunting places that we all seem to have is the Sachs-covered bridge, and it's now on Waterworks Road in Gettysburg, but they believe three hanged Confederate soldiers now are in this area, but do we really know if they're Confederate or Union?
Yeah, and aside from that, which we'll get to that later when we for sure talk more about like logic and things like that, it's not even for sure proven, I don't think, that they were actually hanged there. It was claimed that three Confederate deserters, like apparently they deserted, were hanged on Sachs Bridge? Sachs. Sorry, my apologies, Gettysburg people. But Sachs Bridge, there was apparently three hanged. So I would understand why you'd haunt that kind of space. But yeah, I just wanted to make it known. Like, yeah, I don't know why they deserted, but it sounded like they were basically treason. They're hanged for not good behavior.
Another very popular place is the Devil's Den. It was a rock formation that Confederate snipers used, likely where a potential sniper for the earlier mentioned Commander Reynolds, who was shot on the first day, where he may have been shot from. Soldier outlines have been seen here, and many of battle sounds like guns, cannons, and cries, drums, and so on have been heard here.
So specifically, I just wanted to also note we are now on the battlefield. Sachs Bridge is not necessarily on the battlefield. Well, Devil's Den is.
Yeah. So what I have about the Devil's Den is there has been photographic evidence from multiple photographers who have captured a fleeting soldier with long, unkempt hair,
yes,
shoeless, and tattered clothes, wearing a floppy-brimmed hat. Some reports have even claimed to hearing this apparition speaking aloud before vanishing.
So the only thing that I have, first off, maybe this is A.P. Hill, because if he sounds dirty. Second off, how do they know he's a soldier? Because he actually sounds like just
homeless.
Yeah, like, no offense. How can these sightings tell soldiers? And I know, as Mantis said, we're going to talk about this a little later, but definitely a weird, right? Or am I missing something?
I think it is weird, but also maybe if it is A.P. Hill, they have seen pictures of him potentially.
He's so dirty looking. I'm sorry. Like, the rest of them actually look clean. Confederate or Union generals are like, yes, I'm posed. And then this guy's just like, I like pigs. Like,
I mean, I get it. This was a hard time to keep clean.
Yeah.
But at the same time, dude.
As a general.
Take care of yourself. Come on.
He seemed wild, okay? Woo! Maybe he'd be a good time, but like, not for like the modern day.
Well, and another thing I found interesting, almost about every single haunted place in Gettysburg connected to the battle is people have reported seeing things all throughout the day and night. So most of the time we just hear about it happening at night or maybe midday, but these seem to happen every day, all day.
Yeah, no, for sure. Did you have any more, Mantis, on specifically like the battlefield? Like, what is haunted on the battlefield?
So there's been a lot of supposed sightings and here like audio, I don't know what you would necessarily say for that, but of soldiers killed in battle. We mentioned that obviously. But a big one is the Phantom Regiment, which a lot of people believe are Confederate soldiers that are still marching, still lining up for battle. And it's really interesting to think that they might still be trapped in that time loop of forever being at war, whether it's with themselves or whether it's with the Union.
And they're spotted not at any specific part, right? Like, they're just literally called the Phantom Regiment because maybe they can show up anywhere?
Yeah, so they're seen like marching, and people have heard battle drums and things like that when they see the regiment.
I will say, out of all the things we've covered so far, which I know this is not too far into our episode repertoire, but out of all the ones we've covered so far, this is the one where I heard the most just ambient residual noises. Like people are hearing muskets and drums and cannons. It's very specific.
Mantis, if you don't have any more on the battlefield, I have a few other spots that were.
I actually saw something that claimed that there's also some slave spirits there. They potentially, I'm not sure how true this would be, but slaves could have been brought onto battlefields, whether forced into actually fighting or whether they had to serve for especially the Confederate Army at this time. Most definitely at the Confederate Army.
And we'll get into this a bit later, but the Dobbin House was a stopping point of the Underground Railroad.
Oh.
So very much slaves in Gettysburg could be seen.
Yeah, for sure. So, and then all I have left in terms of the battlefield for sure itself, and I know that you had the elaborate name of one of them, so stick with me, Shay. But, so the first thing that I have is, we did mention the Phantom Regiment, and I know you said you didn't want to mention this, Mantis, because it is a little stereotypical, which I completely understand, but I want to explain it anyway, since it's a sighting, is the Lady in White. And this is literally so stereotypical Phantom. It reminds me of, like, the Skyrim mission. Okay. It's a side mission, okay? It's a side quest. It's not for real. But anyway, the Lady in White, her basically whole role is people see just a very mystical woman wearing a long dress, completely embodied in white, usually crying, usually screaming, moaning, things like that. And people suppose, because she's on the battlefield for some reason, people suppose that she's looking for a dead potential soldier or something like that, and they assume it's just a residual thing. Now, I don't actually hear too many actual legitimate sightings on her, but I do see a lot of almost folklore about it, so I did want to point that out.
Yeah, it's one of the few that I've researched that didn't have any photographic evidence, which is strange that all of these other hauntings have had not all of them, but a good majority of them have photographic evidence of a spirit.
Yeah, no, it's weird.
Even when doing some research, there's a lot of these white ladies, white women, I shouldn't say white
Well,
women.
we know what you mean. Like, it's like a white apparition, not necessarily their skin color.
And they're almost always in this spot where just pure devastation happened, and you can always hear them supposedly crying or screaming. They're always in some mourning state.
No, it's almost and I'll also mention it for Gettysburg, because I know people have literally been seeing ghosts at Gettysburg supposedly since 1864-ish.
It's literally the first sight of a ghost was 2 months after the Battle of Gettysburg ended.
Crazy. But so since this is so stereotypical and rooted in ghostly history, I'll mention the more stereotypical things, because maybe, who knows, this was like the start of that stereotype. I don't even know. Maybe the Lady in White is the true
Lady in White.
Yeah, like she started the stereotype thing. But do I know that for sure? No. I just wanted to mention it.
So some other smaller places on the actual battlefield that were haunted but don't have as many evidences is Pickett's Charge, Little Round Top, the Peach Orchid, and the Wheat Field.
So I think that Mantis actually has something on Little Round Top, and then I know I specifically have two mentions of some area called the Valley of Death.
Oh yeah, that was the other one I meant to mention.
And I have this thing that, and I don't ask me where it is on the battlefield, I don't know, but I have something called the Triangular Field.
Yes, the Triangular Field. I have a little bit on that.
But Mantis, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you had on Little Round Top?
I don't have a whole lot, but Little Round Top has been one of the more active locations. It's one of the more popular locations, even in the battle itself. That's where a lot of deaths occurred. A lot of people, same deal, they hear noises, they see soldiers there.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Andy, you want to talk about the Valley of Death?
Yeah, and I think the Valley of Death might actually be around Little Hill.
It's like right next to it.
Or it might be in it, because I've heard that, or if I remember correctly, I feel like when I looked up Valley of Death, it's such a specific area, a lot of people don't even use that term to describe it.
That's why I couldn't really find much on it.
Yeah, it's hard to research, but the only thing that I keep seeing is apparently that's one of the hot spots.
Yeah, that and the Triangular Field.
Yes, but the Triangular Field is different only because from what I saw, so the Valley of Death, I saw that there's a lot of stereotypical things that you expect, which is like, seeing apparitions, seeing certain orbs, things like that.
And
like
the hearing things.
There's drums still. That's a big one around here. But then the triangular field, what I got from that was weird because apparently that's where equipment breaks.
Yep.
That is so weird. Like, you're like in this specific part, that's where your phone breaks. That's when your camera batteries die. That's where the EVP recording, audio recorders start to die. It's a weird field.
There was some excerpt in the article I was reading of this guy. He has like a ghost hunting channel, and they didn't disclose who it was. He wanted to stay anonymous.
Like a YouTube channel?
I don't know if it was like, this article was from like 2004. So,
oh gosh. Okay.
So he said his camera, not only did the batteries drain, but it went completely static when he replaced the batteries. So his whole camera was just screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you have anything specifically else on the battlefield, Shay?
No. That's all I found. Okay. I mean, the peach orchid, it was...
Yeah, what is that? Is there actual peaches? Does anybody know?
Yeah, it's an actual peach orchid, as far as I'm aware. But the only thing I found on that was apparitions, and I didn't want to keep repeating myself.
Okay. So I know that Shay has the most notes on other areas, so I'm just going to say the only other area that we haven't touched on that I know. All right, so I know one thing for sure that I also had recorded, because I know that Shay, you have a lot, is the Tilly Pierce house or inn. I think it's a B&B now, so you can go and have an actual stay, a bed and breakfast there. But the only crazy thing about that, aside from what we mentioned earlier about it, which is just Tilly Pierce was a 15-year-old girl at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg who was literally helping with the amputations, helping with medical things on soldiers. I'm not sure if she took in both Confederate and Union, but I know she was definitely doing soldier amputations at a very young age, and that's what was astounding about her. But her house is claimed to be haunted by, obviously, soldiers. But then another big one that I was like, this is random, is it's claimed to also be haunted by kids. Some people think it's the ghost of Tilly as a kid, but she also lived and died relatively old, so if we're actually going off of a stereotypical ghost, that doesn't make much sense. And then my favorite one is they also claim there is a poltergeist cat around the area. So,
sorry.
No, yeah, you're good. It's funny, and they also claim that if you go there and stay there, the blue room, whatever that is the haunted area. So yeah, that's the last I had, but I know that Shay, once again, had a lot.
Yeah, so one thing I want to add about the Tilly Pierce house is one thing that is reported a lot is laughter. They hear a lot of laughing, and it sounds like a little girl. So
yeah, why do they think that's her?
Whoever this young girl is, I do not think it is Tilly, because like you said, she lived pretty long after the war. So it doesn't make much sense for it to be her. All right, so Mantis was just brought up the children's orphanage. So this orphanage started off as a private home and turned into a makeshift hospital for wounded soldiers. This actually
like everything else.
This one actually might be one that did take both, because it didn't say if it only took Union or Confederate.
I also will say I'm pretty sure the orphanage has expanded now, and it is called a museum, like a Soldiers National Museum. So I just wanted to FYI that it's something else that also has remnants of the battle itself in there.
Yeah, so a lot of soldiers died in this house while it was a hospital.
Oh yeah,
there is a skull there now.
Yeah, there is a skull down in the. It was found down in the cellar of that basement.
Like a child.
I think it's a child's skull.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about the history of the orphanage.
So it's a little messed up. So trigger warning for anyone who does not like child abuse.
For anybody who's an orphan.
So after the Battle of Gettysburg, the facility was converted into the National Soldiers Orphanage Homestead, an orphanage for kids who lost their parents in battle. It was rumored that the owner, Rosa J. Carmichael, tortured and chained orphan children in a dungeon she secretly created in the cellar there. And to this day, in that orphanage, specifically down in the cellar, they will hear children crying, they will hear "help me" or "she's a monster."
That's weird. And I will say, I've seen a little bit on the ghosts, like a couple of videos on YouTube and things like that about the ghosts of Gettysburg. And from what I understand about this orphanage, they get a lot of intelligent responses, which if you don't know what an intelligent response is in reference to this, it's just a spirit or a supposed spirit that is actually responding accurately to questions. So it is weird. It's a weird area, and it's depressing.
Well, and the orphanage is honestly the saddest one to me, specifically because these kids already lost their parents in battle, and second, now they're being chained up and tortured by this evil woman.
Isn't that like the plot of Annie?
Potentially. No. Annie did not get chained up.
Arthur Warbucks comes in and takes Annie out of the shackles. And
It's a hard knock life
For me. Okay, so is there any others that you guys want to specifically pick, like talk about, or do you want me to just keep going?
You can keep going, man. We don't have as many as you.
All right, so going back to more at the battlefield, it's like not on the battlefield, but very, very close. It's Iverson's Pits. The area around the modern Doubleday Inn is widely known for its paranormal activity. It was the former site of the Forney farmhouse, notoriously the location of a mass gravesite known as Iverson Pits.
Oh, is it like a battle grave site?
Yeah,
I saw a lot of like
unmarked graves and
yeah. Well, and then did you hear that they actually at some point started recruiting civilians to like dig up?
them. Yeah.
And then like they weren't deep enough, so like people would see hands poking out later. I'm like, ugh, sorry.
Yeah, and then they had to like rebury them. And so an entire barrage of North Carolinian soldiers needlessly slaughtered near there and buried in mass where they fell. Numerous reports of floating orbs and hovering lights, strange mists, and shadowy figures wander around the field. So it wasn't necessarily a part of the Battle of Gettysburg, it sounds like, but it was definitely near there and around the same time.
And it was probably a grave for soldiers, so it's similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next one I want to bring up is Gettysburg College. It was known as Pennsylvania College at the time in the 1863 battle.
Oh my God, so it was still around?
Yeah, it's old.
That's insane.
The campus was literally located almost in the middle of the battle.
My teachers still wouldn't call off for school.
During the time, since it was July, they probably didn't have students
fair.
there, but they provided shelters for the wounded and dying. Again, many of these buildings did. Its main building, Pennsylvania Hall, constructed in 1837, was nicknamed Old Dorm as a Confederate field hospital. So this one, they do confirm that these soldiers that they see haunting this place are more than likely Confederate. Much of the paranormal, there's so much paranormal activity there that it's literally nicknamed the Haunted College. Very original.
I know, right?
So one of the main things is they see ghostly figures of soldiers pacing back and forth in the cupola of the building, and the shadowy figure of a Confederate sentry has been spotted in the tower, sometimes gesturing wildly to watchers below.
Weird. Oh my God, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know why that unsettles me. Like the idea of somebody up there like, whoa, and I'm like, what's that? What is that?
Well, the strangest one to me in this entire college was two college administrators got onto the elevator, and as the doors opened, they saw a grisly scene of Civil War era medical treatments in operating rooms. And then
sorry, I love that.
the elevator door closed and then reopened, and the scene was gone.
Okay, that would
trip me out.
That is the same level as the Shining elevator opening up with all the blood.
Literally.
take it with a grain of salt as you will.
Yeah, no, for sure,
Literally.
obviously.
And then there's a couple more I want to bring up. So the Dobbin House. The Dobbin House was an old inn that existed during the Civil War. The ghost of a Confederate soldier is said to stare forlornly out of one of the second floor.
Forlornly.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm sad.
I wasn't like, why are you using that word?
I like the word forlornly.
Okay.
Plus, it's like, it sounds better than repeating sad.
Well, he's
sad. But the Dobbin House, I had mentioned this earlier, it was an important stop in Gettysburg for the Underground Railroad.
Oh, yeah.
Slaves who hid here en route to freedom further north were forced to conceal themselves for lengthy periods in a tiny secret hiding places located beneath the floor and walls of the inn building. So this is one where they have reported seeing both Confederate soldiers, Union soldiers, and slaves.
That's
I think I
insane.
said both. I meant all.
When Mantis first told me that there were slaves potentially on the battlefield, like the apparitions / ghosts of slaves, it was like, really? I did not pick up any of that on my research, but I think that's a great reason as to why I didn't know even Gettysburg was a potential stop of the Underground Railroad.
But it makes sense because Pennsylvania was in Union territory, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it makes sense for there to be an Underground Railroad stop, in my opinion. Also about the Dobbin House. The owner and founder of the inn, Alexander Dobbin, still appears at various places throughout the inn and always smoking a cigar. Some guests have reported smelling.
Another reason why this would be like pretty huge, especially for slaves, is that since it was sitting on the border, like right across from Maryland, which was a slave state at the time, this would have been really big for just, I believe Maryland was still in the Union. There was only a few states that were slave states that were in the Union, but it would have been huge for escapees to try to make it into a free state just north of the border.
Yeah, and they were doing everything they could to just get freedom. One of the things that has been reported being seen is unexplained bloodstain on floorboards.
Ghostly bloodstain.
Yeah.
That's a new one for me. I'm not used to that. It gives the same energy as that episode of SpongeBob where Squidward was like, and on the walls will use green slime. We gotta throw in humor, guys, because this is some dark stuff. Talking about
slash
slaves.
slinging, the rash slinging.
Wash your hands.
Another inn during the Civil War was the Farnsworth Inn. It has no less than 16 distinct spirits.
Disgusting. Oh my gosh. Sorry, like each of these places could be its own paranormal investigation. That
You would have to
dedicate
take
time.
like a week there to investigate all of
Potentially
these.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So one thing in the Farnsworth Inn is that it is reported there's an 8-year-old boy in there. I don't know why they have the exact age, but young child, several Civil War soldiers, and a former midwife. Sounds of disembodied breathing, grunts, voices, and the musical strains of a jaw harp, along with the scent of cigars, have been present in this home. And then this is another one that has photographic pictures of manifestations. One of the more popular manifestations and photos, one of these guests or soldiers, whoever they're seeing, is just staring at them from the street below.
Yeah.
So like they're taking a picture from the inside of their room and he's just staring right back at them. No thank you. The Hoffman Mansion. The Hoffman Mansion, once Hoffman Farm, was a 123-acre dairy farm owned by the Hoffman family. Obviously, if you didn't piece that together. The Hoffman Mansion was reportedly used as a hospital for Union troops, both during and after Pickett's charge. So this is another one of the areas that has photographs, mainly just of orbs, but it is said that the head doctor at this hospital still haunts there. I was trying to find the name, but they didn't really give one.
It's a doctor.
It's a doctor. And then a shadowy black shape is rumored to appear in corners all throughout the house, which apparently is seen as bad luck.
Well, rip.
So disembodied voices and strange sounds are often reported, but then there are some reports of physical contact.
Always fun.
So that one, it seemed like it happened more to women. They were actually being physically touched, which is kind of rough for women.
Okay, that's a
I'm
statement.
sorry, women.
I'm sorry, women.
That's
Diver would be good.
Oh, yeah.
And then the last one I found was the George house. Yes, this man was named George. So this is the house where Union Major General John F. Reynolds passed away.
Oh, so like they brought him there post-battle.
Yeah. So if you don't remember, little recap, John F. Reynolds was shot on the first day critically and then later died after being moved to the George house. So many say like this house is occupied by at least 4 different ghosts, one being John F. Reynolds, the other being his fiancée Catherine Hewitt, and then a petulant, mischievous 4th ghost, and a teenage boy.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. There wasn't really any evidence of that one being haunted. That's just...
The only reason I want to investigate that one is literally because half of the point of after I did all my research on the Gettysburg battle itself, there was like no main people who were actually mentioned as being seen or heard from.
Yeah, he's the only one that actually has a name to him, it seems.
Yeah, literally. So that is interesting. I would investigate there just to like, prove that.
The Tilly house technically does have a name, but that might not even be Tilly.
Yeah, I'm also thinking specifically people involved with the war. Out of all the soldiers I mentioned to you guys, first off, not many of them died at Gettysburg. But it's also the fact that like you don't hear anybody by name who haunts the battlefield or anything. So that is interesting.
Well, there was another unmarked grave area that I didn't cover called the Grove, but there wasn't a whole lot of it connecting it to the Battle of Gettysburg besides it being a bunch of unmarked graves. that were potentially Civil War soldiers.
Yeah.
And
Well, okay, actually, I'm sorry. The ghost of Jenny Wade. Jenny Wade was the woman who was shot on the third day, the only civilian casualty, one of few in the Civil War, but her spirit is supposedly at the house where she was shot, and there have been sounds as well as unexplained movements that have been heard in that house, and a lot of people claim it's her there.
No, and then, so moving on to just the category of sightings, I think we've all kind of identified what people are seeing, with the main thing being soldiers. I would say it seems like for some reason Confederate soldiers are seen more often than Union soldiers. I know statistically more Confederate soldiers died, but there was still a lot of Union soldiers who died.
yeah, it was only, a 2,000 margin?
No, it was about 5,000.
Still, that's not a big enough margin to where it's, oh yeah, these are all Confederate, so how do we know?
Yeah. So,
Besides the hospitals that specifically are for Confederate and or Union, that would be the only time I guess you can confirm that it was one of those.
yeah, so aside from the soldiers, it does seem like there's quite a few slave stories, which is also very interesting.
Yeah, which we could get into a whole Underground Railroad.
Yeah, and we could do that for a further episode for sure. I don't know how much it would actually pull into Gettysburg, but that still is cool. And then a big one that feels very random for Gettysburg, just in general, is it seems like a lot of kids haunt the areas. Like, we have a lot of kids' spirits being
To
claimed.
be fair, there's that orphanage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I mean, even like the Jenny Pearson. where
Jenny
it's-
Pearson, yeah. And then the Tilly house, the little kid there.
And then there's some reports of the railroad. There's boys and things like that. So-
Yeah. And then, I'm trying to find which one.
It doesn't matter, but point being, there's a lot of kids that haunt for sure. I didn't know, what else did you guys pick up on in terms of sightings? Like, what's just some general overview?
I mean, the biggest thing was definitely your typical apparitions. But this Gettysburg hauntings honestly seem like they're heard a lot more before they're seen, which is very interesting to me. Like, you hear footsteps, yes, but to hear ghost gunshots and cannon fires and drums is kind of weird to me.
Yeah, no, and Mantis, do you have anything?
Most of the supposed sightings of the soldiers who, well, I'm sure they don't have a name, but they were likely killed in the battle. They were likely killed in this war. You have to kind of wonder, like, are they connected to this area because it's where they lost their lives, or could they have even survived, but this was one of the more traumatizing days? You never know where the connection could be. These children could have lived longer lives, but that trauma may have stuck with them, and they could have been connected and drawn to it.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, it could easily go for, like you said, the children, the soldiers, and maybe even the slaves if they were forced into battle. Like, if they didn't die necessarily, they probably came back to one, not only this was their first shot at freedom, and two, because it was just so gruesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there's a lot of reasons why we see different types of sightings here. I just think the kid one has always been a consistent weird one. And then we have the stereotypical, but a lot of women, but in a lot of different ways. So we have, like, Jenny Wade, who was shot and killed, sadly. And then we also have Lady in White. Who the heck is that? Is that a girlfriend? What was happening there? And then we also have, like, Tilly Pierce in her house, and why would she be haunting there? Is she just living out the disgusting horror that she experienced when she was 15? So women aren't the main haunts, but, like, there's a weird scattering of women haunting it too.
Well, and then there's so many of these just dark, shadowy figures. Like, they don't even have a face to their name. I mean, a name to their face or whatnot. So what are they? What are they doing here? Were they soldiers? Were they the doctors in these infield hospitals?
Or were they just bystanders?
Yeah, like, do we really know how many bystanders were killed? Because
Yes, it's only one.
Well,
But I mean-
that's documented. That's
Yeah.
true. Technically, like,
it wouldn't be the first time they've covered up, like,
Well,
civilians being killed.
and we're not gonna lie. I mean, if a slave randomly was out there and they got shot in crossfire,
They're not going to care.
Yeah.
I agree, but
No, I agree. There's technically only one reported ever civilian casualty, but that doesn't not mean that it is truly the only one.
I mean, especially since one of these was in a college campus. Who's to say all the teachers and stuff were gone? Yeah, it was July, but I don't know if back then they did summer classes or whatnot.
Yeah, but yeah, no, there's a lot of things going on here. The whole town is supposedly absolutely haunted, which is love that. If you live there and you're a paranormal investigator, you have things for days, but I'm also sure you're sick of everything being associated with the Civil War. But yeah, so, and then in terms of equipment, I know that we've talked about photographs, and I didn't actually take as many detailed notes on that, so I'll pass that to you guys, but I will say, two of the things that I definitely caught and we're talking about for sure is there's been a lot of response to EMF detectors and EVP recorders. So an EMF is just an electromagnetic force field. You can buy EMF detectors even at Home Depot. Basically, they're used to detect radiation from electrical appliances. So normally, in the normal world of not ghost hunting, this can tell you if for some reason you have radiation issues with your power. Like, this can be used practically is what I'm getting at there. There's practical use. It would help you identify radiation electric issues. You could read the voltage and then figure out how to fix it. I don't know how you go about fixing it, but you can fix it. And in the paranormal world, since we believe it is technically an unproven pseudoscience, but since we believe that ghost spirits give off an electromagnetic force, a lot of people use this to detect, and I have seen a lot on this just working around the battlefield, in the inns, all sorts of things. And then EVPs, pretty obvious. I mean, we're talking about how people can hear with their own ears, very residual noises. So EVP stands for electronic voice phenomenon. We'll get into that, I think, a little bit more and how it can be interpreted when we start the logic section, but I did want to bring it up here to let you guys know that, yeah, of course, things that are talking without an audio recorder already, probably going to do well with an audio recorder. So there's been a lot captured with EVP recorders as well. But yes.
I think my big thing would be wanting to go to the triangular field where they just have all of these technology malfunctions and like they're not your typical let's just drain the battery ones. Like it's full on your equipment gone awry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, Mantis, you had more on some kind of equipment, photography or anything?
Yeah, so one time there was actually a trip that we had to Gettysburg.
Oh gosh, that is forever ago. But
you were like baby.
Well, it's going somewhere. But Andy actually took pictures
of every single statue. I have to add.
and yes, they're not great. They're blurry. They're all
no, that's not true. I was not bad at photography.
Well, some of them are a little blurry, but
I don't think so. I probably deleted a lot, sadly, too.
Anyway.
Besides the point.
Anyway, while looking at some of these pictures, there are like weird white orbs in some of them, and then sometimes they're just gone in the next, and it'll be almost in the same location. Then it just kind of brings up that point of a lot of these supposed sightings and have kind of been caught on pictures, videos, and so forth. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, a lot of people have seen like misty figures both in photographs and with their own eyes, so that easily could have been what was captured, or an orb.
No, yeah, it's weird. We don't really actually hear of too many of the places that we're at least looking at of just specifically picture evidence, but this is a place for it where you'll see soldiers in the background, things like that.
Yeah,
things appear later.
This one has a lot of photos to it, and I recommend everyone go check them out because they're kind of cool.
But okay, so yeah, let's actually move on to the logic portion of our talk. The logic is just kind of just let you guys know if you haven't tuned in before. The logic portion is just where we're going to try to like talk about it from a skeptical point of view. We're going to try to address issues. We're going to try to address things, and then we're also going to just go above and beyond and try to explain, even for the believers, like just further explain why is this happening. And no, we don't have any answers, but we're going to pose a lot of questions. But yeah, I didn't know if anybody specifically wanted to start with any logic, but we can start talking about that.
My biggest thing in terms of logic or skepticism is like, how are all of these places, some not even near the battlefield, but semi-connected to them, are so haunted? Like, how is every single one of them have these strong apparitions every time?
I agree, but actually you bring me to a point that I want to start off with, so keep that note of what is haunting. Like, what are we actually talking about when we talk about ghosts, and why do they haunt where they die? Why is that what we connect that to? What if it's not that? What if it's actually legitimately not? I've always said stuff like this. It is like a replay in time. It's not a ghost per se, but conditions are correct, things like that. And we're just, for some reason, hearing some kind of time loop where we are brought back and we can hear the soldiers and stuff like that. But it's not ghost. It's just a weird time loop. Do we have other dimensions? So, like, literally, are things coming from other dimensions and tricking us, making us think of stuff that's not there? So I just want to point out, or slash at least approach it before we go too far into it, to basically say that I think that just because a ghost died somewhere, or just because, sorry, not even a ghost, just because somebody died somewhere, how and why does that define where they'll haunt? Like, and I don't want to close our minds to that. I don't want anybody who's listening or anything like that to think that, well, somebody died at this exact spot, so they can only haunt this exact spot, or vice versa. Why would they go and haunt somewhere that means anything to them? They might haunt somewhere completely random. So what, I just want to point out that there is logical issues with that itself.
Yeah, I did mention earlier, like, about with the soldiers, maybe they were just traumatized. These children may have been traumatized, and that kind of, like, brought some of this emotional, overwhelming kind of just dread to them. So they were stuck to it and kind of just lingered around maybe after.
Well, and I don't even think it's lingering around, but I definitely agree, and I know we've talked about this, the Villisca Axe Murder House, for example, but human energy. If for some reason we took somebody who is not familiar at all with Gettysburg and just dropped them off in Gettysburg, could they still pick up on just the excruciating disgustingness of what happened there? Like, is human energy just connected to human energy?
Maybe we should get someone from some other part of the world over there. Just Europeans, Asians, Africans. Come on.
Anybody wants. But I think it's a good point, because I think sadly us knowing the history is going to imply and affect our judgment on it. It literally is. I mean, and that's what's happening here. And I know we had a big point of why do we keep hearing like sightings about the one thing in this area that has captured the attention of the nation? There have been other people who have died in Gettysburg that are not related to the Civil War. Why do we keep hearing and seeing ghosts related to the Civil War? Is that our own implications as humans? Is that our own?
Or maybe to kind of like go against the grain to kind of answer your question, in my opinion, I think it could be, it was so traumatic that, one, we are replaying the events either subconsciously or we're projecting them somehow into the world, because we don't know everything our brains can do. But it could also be that it's so powerful that it is truly haunted, and whoever dies in Gettysburg doesn't haunt it, if that makes sense.
I would like to say that, this town was founded in 1806, incorporated, it was kind of technically founded around 1760, and there's only probably been around maybe 100,000 people who've lived there totally, like, over its history, and for 51,000 people to die in just 3 days, that's probably more people that have died there than in its entire history.
Yeah, no, absolutely, but why is it that every time we're seeing ghosts is it Civil War? Because there have been so many people who died there, just in general, and then also we never take this into account, or we rarely do, like when we're ghost hunting, and I don't mean us specifically, I just mean ghost hunters in general, but people lived there before even the town was established. We had Native Americans, we had people before probably natives, who probably lived and died on this area of land.
More than likely.
Yeah, so how can we not, how do we know for sure that I'm not saying that Civil War ghosts don't exist here. Obviously, I think it is true, but I want people to question what exactly they're hearing, because it's not always point A to point B.
Why is it so powerful of hauntings around here?
Well, why are the ghosts always equal to Civil War?
It's believed that when there's like a really traumatic event, that spirit kind of lingers there. Like if you were just brutally murdered, or there was some sort of brutal attack that happened there and people died, that there's kind of like a connection where it almost feels a force to remain there. But for these spirits, they feel trapped there and they can't successfully get through peacefully. They can't move on or away from it, so they're just kind of trapped in forever their battle.
Yeah, and I agree, but you're also coming from a ghost believer standpoint.
Well, yeah,
because I'm saying no, and I understand that's definitely a valid argument. I just want to also literally argue it from points that aren't normally argued, because I've heard that from people who believe in ghosts, and that is definitely potentially a case. We don't know anything about ghosts. That's the issue that I have with ghost hunters in the modern day, is we automatically assume they're dead people. We assume we know them. Like who died in Johnny Cash's house? Johnny Cash, he's haunting there. It's not always that cut and dry to me.
I feel every ghost believer needs to have a little bit of skepticism in them.
Yes, I agree. I'm not 100. I don't like the black and white perspectives. Anything. I don't think there should be anybody who's completely skeptical that nothing is abnormal. Because, like we've talked about it, paranormal just means outside of normal. And I think most people can agree, science, any other math, etc., physics, we have not defined everything in our universe. We can't. We don't know these things yet. Is it ghosts? Is it dead people? We don't know.
I think, honestly, hauntings could be a mix of everything.
Absolutely. And I know your point was valid. I just wanted to bring it up that I wanted to definitely say, why does it so happen to be exactly what we want it to be? Why do the hauntings in Gettysburg exactly equivalent to the major thing that happened there? And I agree, me and Mantis actually had a good conversation about this earlier. In one of our references, we did actually hear an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, caught on a normal audio recorder. It was captured, and some people who were, reading into it thought it was soldiers talking about them, but they heard two ghosts on this EVP. They had two ghosts taking time to discuss something, and the last time they spoke, the ghost said, "Don't sweat it." And I was a little confused because I was like, I could be wrong because I don't know slang and its terminology and everything offhand, but I was like, "Don't sweat it" sounds very modern.
Yeah.
Like, why would a soldier be saying, "Hey, don't sweat it,"
That sounds very 50s, 60s, like slang.
But Mantis actually looked it up, and the term wasn't used until, the earliest record. Doesn't mean it can't be a soldier, but I do want to point out that term was used until, what, the 1950s, you said?
Yeah, so according to my source, the first actual record of it was used in 1954, but you also have to realize that this is also an interpretation. They could be mishearing it. That's just...
No, absolutely, but we also have to bring that up in general, that this is an example to me of people going to Gettysburg, hearing ghosts, or hearing what we perceive as ghosts, talking, and yes, it could be a pareidolia, but it could also be they're actually saying "don't sweat it," and we are implying that that's a Civil War soldier, when it might not be. It might be some guy who lived and died in Gettysburg on a farm in 2005.
Yeah, like sometime in the 20th, maybe early 21st century.
Yeah, people have died there, and if we stand to reason to say that certain ghosts are existing there, then why can't other certain... Why is it picky?
Maybe even the lady in white wasn't even connected to the Battle of Gettysburg.
Exactly. What is...
I have found it's granted that there would be a hospital there, but there is a hospital there, and, well, there's actually a few hospitals in Gettysburg, so I'm not sure how long they've been open.
Well, most towns have their own hospital at some point.
I know, it's an obvious presumption, but I would like to say, kind of thinking about it, that there are people outside of the city who could have had some unfortunate accident and died there, and now they're trapped.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we're actually going to believe that ghosts exist, we're going to start talking about the ghost of Gettysburg. It is 90% likely that it would be soldiers, it would be people involved with the war, because that was such a big deal, because there were so many lives lost, specifically in a town that is so small. But I don't know why we're not open to the idea that there are other time periods that also have existed and died since.
Or before.
Exactly. So I'm just saying, that's what I don't get about beliefs, and this is also what I have an issue with ghost hunting in general, and I understand it's hard to eliminate biases, but this is something I also just think we should be trying to work on as a group of paranormal investigators in general. Why do we go to a place? Why do we go to an insane asylum and we only hear doctors and insane people? It's definitely way more likely, don't get me wrong, considering the amount of emotion we connect to hauntings and things like that, but people could have died before that property was even there. Why is that not a thing that's discussed?
Yeah.
I know I've brought it up before, and this kind of is a stupid belief, but running water supposedly gives off enough energy, and you kind of and it's supposed to create almost a portal, so you can even say that these are people who are just literally, they just came there from some unknown portal that, I don't really know how the proper way to phrase it.
I think you don't have to go off of water here because there's no main water source we're talking about, but I think it is a point that you're making of, and I don't love to use this term portal because it is a little weird, but we don't know anything about dimensional beings. And I always took that away as what if ghosts are just some weird alien, and I know this is far-fetched and I don't actually believe this, but I like to pitch ideas. What if it's invisible aliens that like to mess with us? Legitimately, it could be anything. why do we have to assume it's dead people? It could be literally something coming from a different dimension. We don't understand these things. That's why I say paranormal is something I absolutely believe in, because we don't know. There's something, I think, in EVPs. There's something, I think, in electronics that's like obviously happening, but we don't know how to explain it yet.
Right.
And I just want ghost hunters to be more open to that.
What I find really strange about the hauntings of Gettysburg is, one, it's almost the whole town of Gettysburg that seems to be haunted by these Confederate and Union soldiers, but also the first sightings and reports started shortly after it ended. I think it was either September or October of the same year that the first...
Before the Gettysburg Address, literally.
Yeah, before it. So even if people were to say, like, oh, maybe Lincoln did something when he gave his address, called upon these soldiers in a weird way that made them more connected to the grounds, obviously not, because this was reported at least a month or two before.
No, yeah, for sure. And then also, in terms of just like assuming these guys are from the Civil War, assuming these ghosts that we see are from the Civil War, I think it is also a great time to bring up, there's been a lot of assumptions about what soldiers we are seeing. And I know we kind of hinted at this earlier, but I did want this to be a discussion for sure about like why so many people are like, oh, that's obviously a Confederate soldier. If you look up the uniforms, yes, they are different, but to an outline, an apparition that you barely can see, I understand being able to tell it's a soldier if you see certain things, but how do you know which side they're on? I don't think that's, unless you're seeing something full-bodied, full-colored, crazy, which we're not really getting that many reports of in Gettysburg. We're getting outlines, we're getting potential soldiers in clusters. Like, we're seeing soldiers, but how on earth have so many people made the assumption that they're Confederate? I think that is something we need to talk about.
I mean, the fact that people have reported seeing soldiers riding on horseback, it's like, that's insane to me. Like, how do we see that? How do we know?
I don't know also if they, because you know what, I've seen that too. They also say they've seen soldiers riding on horseback, but they don't see the horses necessarily, which is also kind of equally creepier, is the idea that we see soldiers on horses that aren't there.
So they're like straddled and everything over this horse holding the... Well, did they even have saddles back then?
Yes.
Okay.
Saddles are age old.
I know they're old, but I didn't know.
No, I get it. They're probably not modern saddles.
Yeah. So they're just floating through.
It doesn't mean that the horses are there or not, but I do find that infinitely creepier, the idea of just like sitting out in Gettysburg in the field in the middle of the night, and then you just see some...
Well, it's just floating.
It's like, what the heck?
Well, and that's the other thing I found, is that they have heard horses galloping but never seen a horse. Like, that's insane to me. There's all these horse quote-unquote sightings, but no horses.
And it's also old farmland too.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think this is another thing we don't talk about enough in terms of just ghosts in general. If we are actually thinking ghosts are the product of dead beings, dead people, dead animals are a possibility too, which is kind of infinitely hilarious. I love the idea of capturing a ghostly moo. But like, it's true. What if animals are just running about because they've died years and years ago and now they can travel wherever? Like, what are we talking about? Like, it could totally be animals.
Didn't you, Andy, mention a cat earlier?
Yeah, so somebody in the Tilly Pierce house claims that there's a poltergeist cat, and I don't know. It's just like the cat, and sorry, for those of you who don't know, poltergeist, aside from the movie from the 80s, poltergeist does specifically mean objects moving. So that's kind of like, yeah, like something being thrown or something being levitated, things like that.
So how do they know it's a cat? Does it meow?
I think they said they've seen it, and then they've been like, oh, I saw your cat upstairs, and then the people are like, there is no cat.
Okay, never heard of a poltergeist animal, but I have definitely heard of people like seeing dead animals before.
Yeah, it's just, it's odd.
I saw a dead animal on the side of the highway once.
Not like that.
But yeah, no, it's that's also a weird phenomenon, is the idea of animals. And not to say that these people, when they're saying they see soldiers on horseback, don't see horses, but there is literally no mention of it. They're just like, soldiers on horseback. It says, you didn't say soldiers and horses.
Right.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of that. And then also, I think another big thing we need to talk about / just address in general is how often we are hearing residual sounds, so reverberation. Just, is this a replay in time? Is this literally just a replay and our timelines, like they're replaying because the conditions are just right, or are these ghosts too seriously just continue battling despite being dead for years?
I mean, do we know of any other battles throughout the Civil War creating such haunted environments?
I mean, I'm sure, but I'm not a Gettysburg. I'm not a Civil War expert.
I only know
research into that real quick.
I only know of like one other battle that happened during the Civil War, but I've never heard reports of it being haunted.
I mean, I'm sure, right? Like, wherever there's death, I think. I mean, heck, if we get a whole family of 5 murdered, 5 is a lot of people murdered, but 100 gunned down, yeah, I'm sure there's
got to be something.
Battle of Antietam is rumored to be haunted, is said to have some hauntings with it, as well as the Battle of Fredericksburg and the siege of Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, we always have to bring that up because I think it's weird. This is probably our first location, I will say, that we're specifically hearing such obvious residual noises. Like, we're not just hearing like, honey, come downstairs. We're literally hearing gunshots and cannons. And how does that happen? Like, how do we hear when we're supposedly thinking that ghosts are dead people? Cannons weren't alive. Cannons aren't. How do you hear that?
Right.
I do like kind of thinking about it because there's been several things that I've watched where they'll capture in an old bar or saloon that you'll hear a piano or you'll hear glasses cleaning, you'll hear just random ambience noises.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not saying it's made up for Gettysburg. I'm just saying that is an obvious thing that is here that we have not yet discussed on the podcast, but it is something that's okay, how do we make this make sense? Honestly, for the skeptics out there who for some reason are listening to this, thank you first off, it's just I completely agree with you. It sounds weird to hear the stereotypical person who believes in ghosts say, oh yeah, that's a dead person. That's my dead grandma. But then you hear her turn on the TV? You're hearing all that and you how does that work? Because those appliances aren't dead, even if they are destroyed. How do you explain that? So yeah. I completely understand.
Well, I mean, there was one story I read on Reddit.
Love Reddit.
Haunted subreddit.
Take it with a grain of salt already.
This person claimed they were a skeptic before this happened to them, but then a couple months prior, her grandfather died, and they were cleaning out the house. Her grandfather didn't have any modern day technology, no radio, no TV, nothing, besides lights and indoor plumbing.
Okay.
It's modern enough. They heard a radio coming from his upstairs bedroom. He didn't have any in his house. So how do you explain hearing an actual radio playing music?
And it's weird. And I wonder if that's a weird human issue. Is that actually an issue with us? As humans, do we forget that, you know how dogs can hear things from very far away and we know that? Are there things from our own hearing we don't know how to?
Or are our minds subconsciously creating these sounds as a memory?
Yeah, and that's actually one of my points. It's called psychic phenomena. It's basically just messages that psychokinetically form by taking info from memories, from information that you read online, things like that, and then being able to basically connect paranormal. It's kind of the assumption, and honestly, I think, because yes, we've played with it for sure, that's how the Ouija board works. I'm actually almost 100% confident because every time I play with it, it feels like I know what's kind of happening, even though I'm not spelling things out and things like that. I kind of know what's going to be said, and I think what is that? Is that just our own human energy guiding us in a way that it knows what we're thinking, but it's us? There's no ghost there, it's literally just us and our energy?
I've heard that it's subconscious movement between all players.
Yeah.
And I full-heartedly believe that.
I think it's a very valid point.
How legit can something made by Hasbro be communicating with the spirit world?
Don't you love trying to summon a demon on a little game? You're
Zozo!
Oh god, or just any demon. Yeah, but yeah, no, I think that's definitely a point. And also, how much do we implicate into our own ghost hunts? How much does anybody implicate? Once again, I almost think, and I know you'd be completely lost, but it'd be better if you were dropped off in a location, basically given a recorder. Doesn't mean you're not going to get evidence because you don't have a connection. You're probably going to get evidence, but you have no idea why you're there, and then you pick up stuff and you just try to interpret it. I think that's a more pure form of investigation. That's hard to achieve. It's hard to blindfold somebody completely and be like, okay, this is where you are. Like, even if you take somebody to Gettysburg, for example, that doesn't know a thing about it, they're going to see statues and cannons and all sorts of things. They're going to have an idea that there's a battle or something.
One of my favorites actually comes from a certain show where before they actually did an investigation, they already had their evidence in favor, like they already had knowledge of the location. It's just an ordinary hotel, nothing really intriguing about it, nothing that says what happened here. They actually had someone who was just completely didn't know a thing about it go in, and they actually had some relevant experiences with it. And sure, you can say, since it's a show, some of it can be staged, and I'm sure maybe there is, but it's always interesting to me, even if it is staged or not, that they can have something that relevant when they're just completely oblivious to the facts or experiences that have been there before.
I do agree, and I understand you justifying that, but I also, going off of that point, let's also talk about stereotypical ghost hunters, because stereotypical people who like to investigate ghosts, they like to do it in the dark. And one thing about humans is we are not night visioned, we do not stay up very late, we're not technically nocturnal, things like that. Of course, our senses are heightened. This is the same reason why we all get scared about monsters under our bed as kids and stuff like that, because we don't know. The lights go off, we're not suddenly nocturnal, we don't have night vision, things like that.
Yeah, you can't see what's happening around you.
So I'm saying, at the least, what if like your own energy is causing things because of just your heightened, you're so heightened.
I think what separates Gettysburg from that, though, is people have reported it even in broad daylight.
No,
seeing
absolutely.
Things.
And not that I think broad daylight changes much, but I think that's an element that we need to discuss more at night that happens. And I understand why or at least I can reason why ghost hunters do things at night.
Less interference.
Less cars on the road, less people interviewing in the area, just like less commotion. And then technically we also see ghosts appearing as usually light, so it's easier to see a random flicker of light in a very black canvas.
And they are said to give off like a different temperature change, so when you're doing it at night, it's supposed to be colder. I know that's
that's not great. I agree. But I'm saying, like, I understand we connect ghosts with being cold, but you're doing it at night where it's already colder. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about specifically, I understand, but I'm just saying, I'm talking specifically about understanding why they do certain things. But I also know why certain people do these things, because it's scary. They do it because
the adrenaline rush.
The adrenaline, the sights, the heightened senses, and having anything bang, even if it's like, because I mean, hasn't it been proven like humidity does make wood do some weird things?
Yeah, it
so
makes it creak.
Yeah, so like even if you even have just wooden walls in your house and creaks at night, you might get scared because you don't know what the heck that is, but now you're thinking it's a ghost when it's not necessarily, so it's just like your senses are heightened. I don't blame people.
I'm very scared of the dark. I'm not scared to admit that. And I remember growing up as a kid, any slight noise in the house would wake me up for the most part.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, Andy, we're not aware of what's happening around us in complete darkness.
Yeah, humans were not made for that. So it's like, I bring that up because I understand why we paranormally investigate things in the dark. It does help. There's less interference. It doesn't prove anything, because I think still we have to consider that if we see a ball of light, we need to investigate what that could be. Was that a flicker? Was that something coming through the window? Was there some glare? We have to consider. But I understand that most of the time doing things at night does eliminate people, at least some of the uncontrolled aspects. So I get it, but I don't think that's why the majority of paranormal investigators do it. I think they do it for the spook factor and things like that.
Oh, definitely, because the dark just adds another ominous feature to it.
I don't know why, so stay tuned. This season we are going to a prison at some point. Ooh. But I don't know why I always think of it this way, but like if I was in the pitch black, basically alone, specifically if like we split up or something, and I'm alone and I hear, I don't know why I always think of it, but a heavy jail cell just slam, I might have a heart attack.
I'll pee my pants.
But if I'm in the middle of the day, yes, that's still weird. I'm still gonna be like, but I'm way more likely to actually go in and sit there and go find it than I would if it's at night. I'd freeze up.
There's also, you never know if someone's actually in there versus places, you'd actually be able to see it in daylight, and there's a better chance of being able to get a hold of other people at that time.
Yeah, if your life is
human. It's human.
truly in danger.
It's literally what we said the opposite of. We're just not nocturnal, so we're going to do better in the day.
The scariest thing you can encounter in an abandoned place is another human.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
and this is also FYI to all the amateur paranormal investigators out there. This is why you don't break and enter.
Yeah, don't go to abandoned places. I know around here we have an abandoned subway system that people break into all the time.
Yeah.
You can talk to city officials and they'll more than likely give you
I
permission.
doubt for that, but
Well, it depends on what you're doing it for, yeah.
But I agree.
Don't tell them you're ghost hunting.
Yeah, just aside from, yes, a lot of times it's breaking and entering, just don't for your own safety. You don't even know if there could be a raccoon that just
Yeah, just
not
wildlife in general, not even just another human.
No, yeah, so yeah, I think that's definitely something that we have to consider here. I think there's a difference between going to the Gettysburg battlefield during the day than at night. I mean, if you heard a rustle in the tree line, you might get scared, and it could be a completely understandable animal.
Deer.
Yeah, or something. But yeah, was there any more for sure logic we need to touch on? I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something.
I know, I feel like there is something. So since there's so much photographic evidence in multiple parts of these hauntings, and it's from multiple different people, how would you explain that away?
Well, okay, so I agree. You two did more on the photographs than I did. So can you guys elaborate on what you see?
So there's been a lot of photographs specifically near like the Valley of Death and some of the hospitals and stuff where they've seen captured soldiers. I keep wanting to say shoulders. Soldiers on pictures, and then other times it's just been balls of light, so like orbs. So those I feel are a little bit easier to say. It could just be a dust particle that was on your lens, but the full apparitions being caught on camera of these soldiers feels very odd. There's actually even a famous photo of a horse ghost. So yeah, we don't see them often, but there is at least one picture that I know of out there of a ghost horse of Gettysburg.
Okay.
Well, what was the name of the location where the technology malfunctions?
The triangular field.
Okay, I would like to say that there are places around the world where technology just can unexplainably lose connection or freak out a bit just because of the climate in that specific region, whether it's a little bit hot or just something's not right about it. It can be affected very hardly because of it.
What about its sea level?
No, but I agree. I think it's an obvious point. Like, I mean, we talk about electromagnetic fields from the Earth's crust affecting earthquakes, things like that, tectonic plates, even just affecting humans and stuff like that. But yeah, no, so I agree. I think it's fair to point out that just because all your technology in a certain area, like,
out on you.
yeah, basically just kaputs, it doesn't necessarily mean that's paranormal. It's weird. It is not normal, but it is not necessarily paranormal in what we are referencing. So no, I agree. But Mantis, what kind of photos did you specifically see in your research?
I actually didn't see any photos that Shay did not mention, but, kind of thinking back to the personal experience with your camera at the time, it's still, like, sure, you were in a car, and it can be reflecting off the windows.
Absolutely.
Like the sunlight, because we were obviously there in the day. But it's just still interesting to kind of try to look at it from a unique perspective.
No, well, that's not a unique perspective per se. So many people see orbs and they're like, oh my god, it's my dad. But
well, from inside of a car.
Yeah, but I also agree. I think that adds more factors of why it could be completely just you guys are putting meaning, pareidolia. We're putting meaning into something that doesn't have any meaning. So
one of the most, sorry to cut you off, Andy. One of the most famous areas to see a sighting is in this land of statues like we talked about on your camera.
The statue budget was so nice. Like, who built all those?
By the cannons, they always see mist figures or they see full-on apparitions, apparently. There is photos of, like, full soldiers.
She is showing us some right now. But it's also true. It's also true. She says full soldiers. But at the same time, I'm never seeing, and I know it's rare in general, but I'm never seeing Gettysburg full-body apparitions. They're outlines. How do these people tell they're Union or Confederate? They can't. That's, like, literally to me, like, almost factually, unless you have a photo that you could stare at for a long, long time. It's hard to tell. And why did they necessarily necessarily like die in uniform. Maybe they died like later on in like medical bay or something like that.
Maybe their clothes were just cut off because they needed their leg freaking cut off.
Exactly. So it's weird to me that we can make those implications. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I think it should be questioned. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
So for the other locations that aren't the battlefield, do we have any specific doubts? Like, does anybody specifically have any doubts about certain locations? I know Shay mentioned a lot.
Honestly, my biggest doubt is
That elevator.
yeah, the elevator scene at the college, being a whole scene of a hospital operation room. I mean, it was 2 people, but who knows? But also, like, all of these makeshift hospitals were haunted. Like, that seems a little odd to me.
I get it. Why is everyone?
Like, every single one. I get 1 or 2, but there was, like, 5, 6.
And then also, why does it so happen that every single one of these makeshift hospitals has soldiers seen? Like, it's not just random people who lived, worked, or like at the college, for example. What if it's some professor who worked there in 1917? Like, what's preventing him from haunting there? It's valid. I will say, I know that the school thing, I agree with you. It does seem like there is something there, but I don't know how actually crazy it is. And the only reason I even want to touch on that is just because, like, you guys can probably relate. You have one story in a school that, oh, it's supposedly haunted, and kids run with it. They love that type of stuff. I mean, every one of my dorm rooms in college was supposedly haunted. You know, just like, it's very college.
Our grade school library was haunted.
Yeah, or the bathroom.
Oh yeah, everybody went and ghost hunted when the school was closed. Not closed, but like only the auditorium was open for an activity and you could still get to the library.
Yeah, so like, you know what I'm saying. Like, people in specifically mass groups, they hear something might supposedly be haunted and they also kind of just take it and run with it.
It almost feels like they create this energy to make it haunted.
For sure. Is there anywhere you guys specifically believe like is haunted? Like, what seems like it's actually got a lot of things going on?
Honestly, the George house where the General John F. Reynolds died, I could believe that one a lot because that was one they gave a full name for. He was higher ranking.
So the only issue with that is also what a coinky dink. It's the one high ranking guy who was there who died that they get his name.
Right. But I do think it is weird. It is very, all lines up so well that I could easily believe that one was haunted.
Yeah.
I don't know about his fiance or a teenager being there.
Yeah.
But
so Mantis, do you have any specific ones you believe?
To me, the orphanage in the town would make a lot of sense, especially if those allegations of abuse and mistreatment are true. It could very easily be, well, maybe a little active.
I think another one I also want to mention that I think is pretty haunted is the Dobbin house, the one with the underground railroad
If
stop.
you guys are going off a similar energy for her, like of just abuse and stuff, yeah.
That's why I brought that up. You kind of reminded me of that, Mantis.
So one thing I also will say, and I think I want to just at least talk to you guys about, and I didn't really look up like great information on this because it's really hard to explain, but I think it's a great indicator for paranormal stuff. I'll specifically say transform EVPs, which just means audio. So we're not talking about spirit box, nothing that can really truly interfere. And we're talking about audio recording of like intellectual responses. And I know that orphanage has gotten a lot of stuff that is actually like intellectually responding. And what does intellectually responding mean? It just means where we think we're communicating with a ghost that is actually legitimately responding to questions.
Well, and it's more coherent, like more than one word phrases all the time.
Hi, how are you? I'm doing good.
Well, like the help me or she's bad, like
or
those
like
are
specifically acknowledging people in the room is always a weird indicator. Like it for some reason knowing names. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. It's like, why would it know that? I heard that a lot at the orphanage. I'm sure there's other places that have that, but I heard that. So I'll say the battlefield, residual as
yes,
but the orphanage for some reason very intellectual evidence
for children. They're children spirits.
No, I agree. So it's like it brings up the question, and I know we kind of talked about it with Valiska, but we didn't really because they don't sound necessarily super intellectually there either.
Except the one.
2 girls.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's like, you know what I'm saying? What is intellectual? What is that? Because to me, that's the one thing I can't figure out a good excuse for explaining, specifically transform EVPs, which is audio recording. You caught it.
No,
very little chance you're in a basement, something like a cellar, somewhere where outside's not going to be able to be picked up. What are those phenomenons? What are those? Those are, I'm not saying they're necessarily ghosts.
Crossing dimensions.
Yeah. What
time
is that?
ripples. We don't know.
Invisible aliens.
Like, we don't know much about time travel, but could it be someone from the future and or past?
Yeah, I think intellectually responding like spirits, paranormal things, that is a very big diving point for paranormal research in general. I think that's what we try to go after, because if you can do that, if you can replicate energy like that, that's actually very scientifically, like, actually not a pseudoscience anymore. So
yeah,
it is interesting. I don't know if you had anything to add, Mantis, on specifically intellectually responding things specific to Gettysburg.
I would mostly say, I kind of brought this up with the Liska axe murders, but mimics often like to take the form of children just to kind of get into the feelings of someone who's actually there. And the mimic is an entity that supposedly can, mimic or mock, take on the persona of anyone who they so please.
Normally evil, right?
Yes.
And we've talked about this not even being like, it's a good enough point to even bring like up this evil mimic type thing. Aside from that, but going off of it, it's like, what if a ghost is not a ghost, but you go after them once again, calling out specific names, saying, are you children? Do you want to play with this teddy bear? Whoa, what if it's not a ghost? What if it's this weird dimensional creature who picks up and can tell that's what it likes, and it's been hearing that for years, so it knows how we want it to respond?
Well, I think that's what also separates Gettysburg, is there's no direct names. Besides John F. Reynolds, there's no direct names to these spirits.
And I've heard something about the orphanage with the Rosa Carmichael. Is that her name?
Yeah, Rosa Carmichael.
I've heard her not necessarily coming through, but I've heard her be named, which is weird.
Well, I've heard it. So there was one, I don't know where I heard it, but it came through on someone's EVP as like more of a whisper, like they were saying, she's coming.
Which
Rosa.
Is awful. Like, no thank you.
Like, imagine, I would imagine if she had these kids chained up and stuff, that there was more than one down there at a time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
so to hear she's coming and then whisper her name.
Yeah, well, like what? They were playing little games or something? That might just be residual.
Like, they're just going, rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Or they're all chained up and they're just like, what's your favorite color? Which is so depressing.
Oh, God.
But yeah, no, like,
I shouldn't laugh at that.
But I agree, mimics also just lead to another good point, just on ghosts in general. What if whatever this paranormal experience is knows what we want, knows because they've had so many people, specifically the more people get into paranormal investigation, they have so many people coming in and asking such specific questions, they can pick up on what people want and they like to please that. Why would you not?
But I don't want to say it's debunked, but again, going back to how soon after the battle it was reported to see sightings of them. Would it happen that fast?
I don't think that is or isn't adding validity. I think it just adds a lot of time to the validity. Because, I mean, come on. People used to say that, specifically way back in the day, they used to be kind of crazy with their ghost stories.
I saw a ghost!
Well, they used to be like, the ghost picked me up and we went for a ride and then I woke up in my house.
And then we made love.
I don't know. I hope not that far. But I'm just saying, like, the old generations, as in the long dead generations, were also crazy about their ghost stories.
I mean, it was keeping them entertained. They didn't have much to do.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like, yes, the validity of the timing of people consistently still seeing stuff does add to it, but I'm not gonna lie, it's not like people weren't dramatic back then to make something interesting because they didn't have televisions. They didn't always even have books. You had to make interesting things happen. You saw one thing, you created a whole thing, like.
And, I mean, you have to realize that some of these people did it for business, definitely. They made money off of it.
And that's definitely more of a new thing, but I agree. I mean, like, people nowadays, I mean, the Stanley Hotel is a prime example. Could you imagine if you go to the Stanley Hotel and it's not haunted?
Or even Salem.
Yeah.
Salem, Massachusetts.
But literally a lot of their marketing and a lot of their tourism comes from its claims of haunted tourism.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's no reason to do it. So that is a good point. It's just like, okay.
I think it's a mix of both haunted and not haunted. That is my take. psychic.
Yeah, well, no, for sure. So, Mantis, do you want to ask our question?
Yeah, is it haunted, Shay?
Yes, and I believe that a good number of these places in the battlefield are haunted, but I think there's also a lot of time loops. I think history is just replaying and replaying and replaying. Like, the same could be said as if we were to research Auschwitz. I'm sure there are some things there. I'm sure there's some time replaying of these horrible, horrible times.
Is it haunted, Andy?
So, I know I've been the stickler on hauntedness or stuff, but I agree. The validity of just so much and over such a long period of time is going to make me say yes, but at what convention? Like, at what, like, trueness is haunted? In the sense of, like, I think there's obviously something going on here that's fed off of history. Whether that is just time looping, whether that is just human energy and being able to connect, whatever it is, there is something. I don't think it's as much as everybody hypes it up. The whole town is just filled with those. It's not necessarily that, but I'm definitely going to say absolutely. I think on the battlegrounds, I think around town, there are hauntings, yes.
Is it haunted, Mantis?
I'm actually going to say mostly not.
Oh, interesting. Elaborate.
He's the skeptic.
I know, elaborate.
And a lot of that, I'm actually going to say, is the loose definition of what really is considered a haunt. We've talked a lot over these supposed sightings and these supposed sounds, and who's to not say they aren't there? But who's to not say that almost, like we've mentioned it, that we're almost not playing it in our heads, we're not seeing it in our heads. And even for those photos, who's to not say they haven't been tampered with? And those audio recordings, who's to not say they haven't been worked with? I think, though, that there has, because of that deep emotional connection in different areas of the town and of the battle areas itself, that there's definitely gonna be some hauntings there.
Exactly. So, long story short, you're kind of on the same page as me where it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page where it's like
Some of it, but not.
is it haunted to the extent it's being claimed? We're going to say no, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to deny that nothing weird is happening. Something is going on. Whether that is human energy, whether that's residual energy and it's not even ghostly, whatever it is, something is happening.
And who's to not say that something weird may not have been, like, who's to not say that wasn't already there when General, what was his name, who decided to go away? Who's to not say that didn't sway him from
Like
continuing to fire? And
The lady in white appeared to him and said, "Don't fire," and Robert Ewell was like, "Okay." Sorry.
yeah, something like that.
It could be, you're not wrong.
I mean, I have a lot of theories about the lady in white, who she could be.
I know we are trying to end it, but I am curious. What is...
My main one when I was doing some research is, so there's been Native American practices where they talk to spiritual realms. Not all tribes do this, but a lot did. And it could be one that they contacted, and now she is forever connected to the physical world. So that is my big theory with the lady in white.
You had others?
Smaller ones, not fully conclusive.
Okay, like what's one of those?
She's just some girl that got hit or accidentally died or was murdered. Those are my big things. But the Native American one was my biggest one.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I think that was actually a pretty interesting episode. We haven't yet gotten to do anything on soldiers and war and things like that. I think that's always a hot spot for Ghost if we're actually truly going off of what Mantis said, which is like emotional things, because there's a lot of sadness, a lot of death, a lot of unexpectedness. So if something truly doesn't know it died, why wouldn't it keep replaying its life? But yeah, no, I think that's great.
So, who wants to take a trip?
But I know, right? Who wants to go to Gettysburg? Now I know names. Now I can actually be like, oh my God, there's Longstreet. There's Ewell. There's the statue of like, what? I don't know. It has like, I know these people because I had to research it. But yeah, all right, Mantis, do you want to take us out?
Sure. I guess I'll just say some final remarks that we have kind of like a unanimous decision that it's slightly haunted. So yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you have a good one.
And a very special thank you to our editors, Andy and Sam, as well as our host, Andy, Shay, and Mantis. We couldn't do it without any of you, and thank you for listening.